So we talked about yesterday, and certainly the article that we went over, how really close Labour is to power. And I am very, very much of the opinion next year there is going to be a general election because if we get to this point, this time next year, and there hasn't been a general election, and the Tories have somehow managed to hold themselves together and not fall to pieces, I will be very, very, very surprised. Very surprised. But we cannot just assume, we cannot just assume that, Labour is going to win because the Conservatives completely, make a hash of things. We cannot just assume that. And even as I've said, I've told you before, I've started reading, articles on Conservative Home just to, see what, the Conservative, mind and sort of what Conservative writers are thinking now. And they wrote an article a couple of weeks ago saying that no, we as Conservatives should be prepared to win the next general election, that we shouldn't be so pessimistic about it all. And to be honest, I disagree with all the conclusions because, again, they haven't really got a lot to show for their time in office. 12 years, or 12, 13, 14 years at that point of Conservative rule. They haven't really got a lot to show for it. And if anything, the country is in a far, far worse off state since when, they took office. So we cannot just assume that Labour would just win automatically. As I talked about last time, I would far, far rather prefer that essentially the Conservatives get completely and utterly, wiped out with potentially, as we've seen from the polls, around about 100 seats. But then again, remember, we've been here before in the reverse. Theresa May looked at the polls and went, I could win a massive majority and completely, again, wipe Labour off the map with potentially around about 100, maybe even less seats. And she went for a general election. And that general election, as we've said before, was never ever really about Brexit. It was about sort of, pensioners and heating allowances that they got at the time. And, that completely, ruined her, her general election at that point. That caused a lot of troubles. So we cannot just assume that, Labour is automatically going to win. Labour really has to put, certainly at the general election, its best foot forward. I think it really has to be bold. It really has to put forward some radical stuff. We've seen the big constitutional review that we've had. I think that's pretty radical. I think there's a lot of stuff in there that is really, really good. I think the House of Lords reform certainly is going to be difficult. I really got to start, especially telling you guys as well, that if we do go for this House of Lords reform, it's not going to be plain sailing. It's going to be quite difficult to do. So I need to start at least, setting expectations for not only myself, but for you guys as well about that. So there's a lot of good stuff coming out. And of course, we've yet to really see what the full Labour manifesto is. But we have heard good things from, the front benches saying, this is what Labour wants to do. We've heard stuff from really good stuff from Rachel Reeves, Angela Rayner, Ed Miliband over the years about what a Labour government would do. So there are good things. So there's every reason to be really, really hopeful. So we're going to go into this article because, again, this really talks about this, about what Labour has to do to secure an election win. I think it's really important that we have this conversation. So, as always, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel. And of course, there is the YouTube thank you button as well down below, and the Pony Club you can join as well. So, on with this. This comes from the Northeast Bylines with the title of What Should the Labour Party Do to Secure an Election Win? Rishi Sunak's budget hasn't been greeted with much enthusiasm by either the public or his own MPs. And rumours abound that many Tory MPs are looking for other jobs, whereas the public seems to greet it with resignation. That we are in such a mess and these things have to be done. The usual suspects have made a fuss on the Tory benches, but some see it as a very clever move, tipping Labour into saying whether or not it agrees with it, and thereby not concreting, or at least not concerned about the economy. The big cuts have been proposed in an effort to try and placate the markets, but by postponing, hoping that by that time, and especially by the next election arrives, the economy may have improved, they can either or moderate to get rid of it altogether. So, how should Labour react? That is the very, very tricky question. How should Labour react? Labour can go multiple ways, and I think, as we said at the beginning, Labour really has to be bold. It has to be, I think, radical about what steps it has to be doing. The people of the UK are really, really hungry for change. So, Labour should offer the UK and the UK voters change. And it has to not only offer that change, it then has to deliver that change as well. So I would love to see, again, as we've got this constitutional review, um, you know, these are the ideas we've got. Some of them in it is a plan of how we would essentially go about doing it. So that was good. So we want to see more of that. So back to it. So the Liberals will go for the mainly middle class voters in the South because they are being hit hard. And because of their history of support for Europe, they are also in a position to advocate more sensible relations with Europe, which businesses want. Labour seems to be paralysed on this issue. All evidence points to the fact that we need better relations with the EU, whereas Labour seems frightened of upsetting its traditional voters in those red wall seats it wants to win back. And I think these fears are misplaced. The opinion pollster YouGov revealed that the numbers of Britons who think that it was wrong decision to leave the EU is at its highest point since the referendum at 56%, compared to the 32% who believe it was the right decision. I feel the majority would welcome closer links with the EU, which would be seen to improve trade and growth. And of course, we talked about that at length yesterday and the problems that that could potentially cause, because it's not yet, shall we say, set in stone. I would love to see an opinion poll that is focused really on these red wall seats, and especially in these high leave percentage voting areas, about what would they think. Do you think it was right? And more importantly, what if there was, or Labour made moves to rejoin things like the single market, or even another referendum to rejoin the EU? We need to start seeing those polls as well. Like I say, as I said last time in that video, we are further along more than ever in the timeline where many people thought it would be, 2026, maybe even 2030 before we got to this point we are in now. So we are getting there slowly but surely. We are winning the fight. We are winning the arguments. But I don't think we're fully there yet. But anyway, back to it. So, but the main issues which concern people are the price of energy, the environment, and levelling up, which does not seem to be happening. Again, this is, at the moment, is fantastic because the Conservatives are in an absolute fight about levelling up at the moment, and it is not looking good. It is really not looking good. So the last thing you want is a potential Labour government that gets into power, that these, let's say energy prices, environment, and, levelling up, they say, we're going to do our sort of own version of these, and yet we have a big fight and argument about, Europe, and we end up not really fulfilling the things that people are concerned about most. That is a really big concerning issue, because at the end of the day, Labour really has to deliver. It really has to deliver. Certainly, the next, when it gets into power, it has to really be concerned about those big bread and butter issues that people are worried about. So it is sort of thinking ahead and thinking, what are the main priorities that people are going to have? So back to it. So when I talk to Labour Party members, they agree that all these things should be addressed. But I know a distinct lack of enthusiasm. There does not seem to be the enthusiasm or willingness to go out and canvass as there was in 1997. So Labour must not assume that it will win because the Tories make a hash of things. In 2 years' time, the economy may have started to improve. The Ukraine war will be over. Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt's steady as she goes policy may produce some results. Liz Truss and her antics will be a distant memory, and the Tories may be on the track to winning. Labour cannot assume victory is assured. And that is very true. We cannot assume that victory is assured. And even if Sunak does get results with his steady policies, we've seen very, very clearly that the current Conservative Party is not, you know, it basically says, yeah, we're probably not going to win the next election. So you've got three current massive big rebellions going on over things that make the Conservative Party look really, really bad. So these fights are going to continue, and I think they are going to get even worse. At the moment, Sunak has pretty much ensured that these fights are going to get worse. So back to it. So, an interesting parallel is the situation in the early 1930s America. The economy was in a very bad way after the famous Wall Street crash of 1929. Large corporations seemed to be able to do as they wished. Ford hired company cops to beat up strikers. The Republican president, Herbert Hoover, believed in, quote, rugged individualism rather than the power of the state and was reluctant to intervene on a large scale. The situation was not exactly the same as now. Even though the Depression was a shortage of work, it is now a shortage of workers. But the economy is stagnant, unequal, and large corporations in fuel, energy, and transport industry seem to be holding the public to ransom while they make big profits. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was not an ideologue. He was reputed to have told his advisors, "Tell me what works." But he was determined. He faced opposition from the Republicans, who said that he was extending state power, destroying freedom for those who said the government could not afford his reforms. And from the press, the Chicago Tribune called it the New Red Deal or a Soviet steal. Another opponent he had, which we do not hear, was the Supreme Court, which declared many of his measures unconstitutional. The program was about government schemes to help farmers, provide public works, and provide employment, and laws to protect trade unions. The most well known of these was the Tennessee Valley Authority, which was a state owned scheme to help provide cheap electricity across 7 states. It could be considered an early attempt at providing green energy. And although not all these schemes were successful, some were stopped. The New Deal extended the power of the state, which helped poor people by providing public amenities and work. So, what is needed here and now? So, something similar is required here now. There is a need for cheaper and greener energy, new industries in the poorer regions, and a much better railway system controlled by the government. There have to be a fair measures to grow the economy, to bring back those left behind areas, and to move into sustainable energy. If private corporations will not do this, the state must intervene. Labour already has a Green New Deal and promises to set up a publicly owned company, the Great British Energy, to promote it. The idea is to develop cleaner form of energies and to stop reliance on importing fuel from people like Putin. New industrial areas to deliver new schemes will be set in the now left behind and in derelict after the decline of the traditional industries. And as a plan which will deliver growth and leveling up and cheaper energy sounds attractive, far more so than paying more taxes or even worse services. So it is far from not gaining much traction with the British public. The Labour Party has to get out there and sell it. And that is very true. And I think we are. To be honest, I think we are going out and really doing this and selling this. I know that there is a lot of really, I do sort of agree with the writer of this article. There is a bit of disheartenment within the Labour Party, which is very disappointing. You know, the fact that we are this close to power, the fact that there is so much that we can do, and yet so many people seem to be sort of really quite disappointed. I think really what the Labour Party really is lacking is an energy guy, a guy who can just go out and be big, bombastic, and start, bigging up these policies. I think that's really at the moment what's Labour's missing. And ironically, it's exactly what Boris Johnson is really the Conservative Party. He is their big, gets out the big drum and just goes boom, boom, boom. Vote Conservative, vote Conservative. We need someone else out there as well with their big drum, banging the drum, saying, vote Labour, vote Labour. And he's able to tell sort of a good sort of story to the public about, why you should vote Labour and what a Labour government will do in power and why these policies are good. So that's really what we need, certainly more than ever. I really can't sort of pick out an individual. Ed Miliband, although I think potentially could definitely fill that role. He definitely has the energy and stuff to do it. I would really like to see Angela Rayner start to step up and sort of fulfill that role as well, because I think she would be really, really good at that as well. So we'll all have to see what happens. But yeah, fun times ahead, and I agree. We cannot just sit and rest on our laurels. We need to be really talking out and talking up the good stuff that is happening, that Labour is sort of putting forward. Obviously, you have the big constitutional reform. We've got the sort of the Labour's very own Green New Deal, which really I think needs to be pushed and sold more on. But we'll see. We'll have to see what happens. And like I say, I think there's going to be a general election next year, because I really do not think the Conservatives can hold themselves together. The fact that Rishi Sunak came in and almost within 2 weeks, you've had 3 very big, significant rebellions, basically meaning Sunak cannot pass any substantial policies, and that they have shown themselves, yeah, we will rebel to get what we want. Sunak is now governing as if he has a majority of 0. So yeah, I don't think the Tories will be able to hold themselves together for 2 years. I will be, like I said at the beginning, I will be very shocked if we're here, but this time next year, and they've managed to hold themselves together. Even then, I think Rishi Sunak, if we do get to this point by next year, I think Rishi Sunak is going to be doing a sprint to the next general election by then, if we're still at this point, and they've just managed to hold themselves together. But as always, thank you guys for watching. As always, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and one off dish link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.